Have you ever opened your mailbox and felt your whole future slip through your fingers like a single sheet of pink paper? That's what happened to me, Sarah Whitfield. On the Tuesday, the cottonwoods turned gold and the air smelled like fresh rain on cedar. I was 34, proud of my job curating the children's section at Weatherford's only indie bookstore, and I believed in happily ever after the way kids believe in dragons. Then the owner's email arrived, 3 sentences, no severance, doors locked by Friday. I read it standing barefoot on my porch, the clink of the mailbox slot still ringing in my ears like a cracked bell. Shock first, me pools felt like a trapped bird. Then fear, rent, utilities, the stack of medical bills from Mom's stroke last spring. I walked inside, shut the door, and let the silence swallow me whole. That night, the wind off the plains rattled my windows the way doubts rattle a soul. I sat at the kitchen table, calculator open, numbers blinking red. Every dream I'd bookmarked for someday suddenly felt checked, out, overdue. Wednesday dawned the color of weak tea. I forced myself to Main Street, hoodie pulled low, eyes on the sidewalk cracks. The neon sign of Dot's Diner buzzed like a tired firefly. Inside, the air was thick with coffee and the sizzle of Dot's signature calf fries and gravy. I took the corner booth, ordered nothing, just stared at the laminated menu until the prices blurred. Across the street, the bookstore's windows were already papered over. My reflection looked smaller than I remembered. A single thought looped. I failed. That afternoon, the sky cracked open late July rain, drumming the tin awnings like loose change. I trudged home, soaked, shoes squelching, heart heavier than the Oklahoma clay. Inside, I peeled off wet socks and let them slap the tile, such a stupid human sound, and then I cried, loud enough that I didn't hear the gentle knock at first. When I opened the door, Mr. Johnson stood there in a windbreaker the color of oatmeal, holding a foil-covered casserole dish. 78 years old, retired postmaster, the kind of man who still tips his cap to squirrels. He said, "Heard the news, Sarah. Thought you might need something that doesn't come with a deadline." I managed a watery smile and stepped aside. We sat at my table in my ratty robe, him in slacks pressed sharper than my future. He lifted the foil, the scent of chicken pot, pie, filled the kitchen like a lullaby. Between bites, he told me stories, how he'd been laid off in '82, how the town library hired him part-time to shelve books, how that detour led him to discover poetry. Sometimes, he said, the road bends because the scenery's better on the new path. I wanted to believe him, but the numbers in my head screamed louder. Before he left, he tucked a small envelope beside the casserole dish. Inside, a handwritten list, Weatherford Public Library, Tuesday Knitting Circle, they need a reader for kids, Community Foundation Grant Office, and a crisp $50 bill paper clipped to a note. For gas, pay it forward someday. The next morning, the rain had washed the sky clean. I drove to the library, tires hissing over wet asphalt, red-winged blackbirds whistling from the cattails along the Canadian River. Mrs. Lopez at the desk listened, nodded, and said, "Story time lost its reader last week. Can you start tomorrow?" My throat closed. Yes, tumbled out before fear could catch it. Friday came the day the bookstore would have closed. Instead, I stood in the library's sunlit children's corner, reading The Little Engine That Could to a rug full of toddlers. Halfway through, a tiny girl tugged my sleeve. "I like your sparkly shoes," she whispered, and I felt the first crack of light inside my chest. That weekend, Mr. Johnson invited me over for lemonade. His backyard smelled of newly mown Bermuda and the cedar fence after rain. He showed me a flyer. Weatherford's sesquicentennial committee needed a grant writer for community literacy events. My heart-stuttered grant writing was my secret side hustle skill. He smiled like he'd known all along. I applied, referencing my bookstore experience and fresh library hours. 2 weeks later, the email arrived, subject line, in all caps, "Congratulations. Funding secured, salary modest but enough, plus benefits." I ran barefoot across my yard, the grass cool and forgiving, and thanked the sky until it echoed back. But here's the gentle twist no outline predicted. The committee chair was Mrs. Dot herself from the diner. She confessed over coffee. "I kept the bookstore open as long as I could, Hon. When I saw you reading at the library, I knew the story wasn't over, it was just turning the page." She slid a brass key across the table. "How about we reopen the kids' corner together under new lights?" That night, I stood on my porch again, stars thick as spilled sugar over the plains. The mailbox clinked this time. It was a thank you card from the library kids, crayon drawings of trains and purple unicorns. I pressed it to my chest and whispered to you, to anyone listening in the dark, when did a stranger last remind you you're not alone? I rebuilt, not overnight. Some mornings, anxiety still sat on my chest like a cat that wouldn't budge. But every Tuesday, Mr. Johnson showed up with a new poem scribbled on a receipt, and every story time a child handed me a dandelion like it was a crown. Slowly the colors came, back gold mornings, cobalt evenings, the soft rose of possibility. By winter, the bookstore had a fresh coat of sage green paint, a reading nook shaped like a treehouse, and a sign that read, "Whitfield Dots Where Stories Keep Going." We hosted seniors for afternoon teas, teens for poetry slams, toddlers for puppet shows. Mr. Johnson shelved returns in exchange for coffee and corny jokes. The town hummed, small-town kindness stitched through every aisle. On the first snowfall, I found him outside shoveling my walk before sunrise, breath fogging like dragon smoke. I wrapped a scarf around his neck-navy with tiny books on it and said, "You saved me." He chuckled. "No, Sarah, you just remembered you were worth saving." The moral is simple, and I wear it like a locket. Hope rides in on ordinary hands, and every closed door leaves a crack wide enough for light if we let someone hold the flashlight. If this moment lit even a tiny spark, please share it with one person who might need warmth tonight. Comment below with your own story of small-town kindness. Hit subscribe for more feel-good moments, and remember, sometimes the best chapters begin when we think the book is over. Watch next story. In the quiet heart of Weatherford, we proved that a single heartwarming story can rewrite a whole town's ending.